Hi there, everybody, and welcome to Talking True. Joining me is Te'Devan Kriyavan Kurzweil. We had another conversation a little while ago, which is titled Akashic and Nadi Leaf Readings, Is Your Destiny Already Written? So if you didn't watch that yet, please go there because it's an amazing episode and there's been a lot of views and we've had a lot of feedback from it. So Te'Devan is joining me today to dive into another conversation, which is titled Akashic and Nadi Wisdom from Avatars, Sages, and Enlightened Beings. So stick around. This will be a good one. So Te'Devan, thank you so much for joining me today. As always, it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
So let's start with, you recently had a second Nadi Leaf reading, correct?
Yeah, so it'd been 15 months. So I've learned a little bit more in that process. So of course, there was the book of Bragu, but apparently there's lots of other, different sages that have written these leaves. I can't remember the exact name of this particular sage, but he was from South India and he had made his way to North India. And apparently his leaves aren't as common. Maybe he didn't write as many, I don't know. But he said definitely some of the things that Augustia had said to me, but then some other stuff. So he kind of focused on Qigong and the specifics of what, some of my health challenges would be. And he went into some of my connections to Buddhism, which I feel like if I wasn't so in the Vedas in India, the interest that I have in Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism in particular would be considered like, oh, that's what you are. But I just, I'm interested in a lot of these things. Yeah, so he brought up some different stuff. It seemed like some timelines changed a little bit, not a lot, but a little shift. So I was curious, having done, the remedies, but also my own spiritual practice, sitting with incredible saints and yogis. I wanted to know, what would have shifted.
So if anybody who's listening or watching wants to know about a Nadi Leaf reading, do you want to just detail what that is, in case they didn't
Yeah, so different ones. There's also the Book of Bragu and other ones that I don't know off the top of my head. But generally they'll measure your thumbprints, right? They'll look at your thumbprints, or they'll measure your hand, or they'll measure your shadow at a certain time of day, whatever they got to do. Then they'll ask you a series of yes, no questions until they go, okay, now we've found your leaf. And once they found your leaf, they'll tell you your mom's name, your dad's name, and they'll go into details that just the internet alone couldn't dig up. And I found it to be, very significant and impactful for me. I think you do it if you feel a calling. If you don't feel a calling, then don't bother. But I also think it's interesting, this idea of, the past was incredibly accurate, the present incredibly accurate, and the future can be shifted to some degree, as I understand it. The three types of karma: a karma that cannot be changed, that is fixed; a karma that can be lessened; and a karma that can be totally removed. And I think it, delves, your spiritual practices, the holy places you go, the guru's grace. I think at the end of the day, when I really look at my life, it's just the guru's grace guiding me here, taking me there, taking me away from this. And even when going through those moments that are really hard, they're hard because we're attached to outcomes. They're hard because we're attached to the way that we want life to be. And I feel the more that we let go of that, the easier it all becomes. And it's our attachment to a particular narrative and a particular story and how we think it should have gone, and our insistence on it going that way. And, I do think sometimes when you get knocked down, it's not to say, hey, don't go that way. It's to, to put more efforts and to dig deeper. But other times I think it's a redirect. Life saying, hey, maybe, just maybe, it's time to consider going in a different direction. And I think it takes, sitting with yourself and looking inside, and, the guru's grace, descending, and then that guidance coming to take you to where you need to be.
Yes. So again, just for clarity, for people that really don't have any experience or have read anything about Nadi Leaf readings, this isn't when you go for a reading from someone, this isn't just him or her kind of going into the ethers and pulling the information down, right? They're reading from a leaf, an ancient leaf that was written thousands of years ago. How many years?
Many thousands. I think it depends on which sage wrote your leaf, right? And I do think the Vedas date back farther than whatever, if you Google how old are the Vedas, I think the Vedas are much older than whatever Google will tell you, So I think there's also a lot of that involved. So I think this is a pretty ancient tradition, and yeah, there's passed in family lineages and father to son. And they actually, what was interesting about this last one was they told me I was supposed to share the Nadi Leaf readings, and that was part of my journey as well, which they didn't really talk about in the first one. And they said, at some point that I would do Akashic Record readings, but also a term that I don't know what it meant, but they said I would do Akashic healings, which I don't know if to surmise, I guess that means helping to remove karma, right?
Yes.
That's the way I interpret it, but I don't know for sure. But yeah, it was, I've always just been fascinated by, all of the different metaphysical, supernatural stuff that exists. It's not the end all be all, but I do find it interesting, sort of, there's still a kid in me, and the kid likes candy, and that would be candy. But I wouldn't base my meal for the day off of the candy, but it certainly gets my attention. I'd be dishonest if I said otherwise.
Well, when I had my reading, which was, let me think now, I think it was in early July. As you said, what happens and this is for people who are interested or, don't know anything about it, but what happens is you go through a series of yes or no responses. You asked a question, you say yes or no, or correct or incorrect, and the thing that impressed me was that there was a great big thick kind of sheath of leaves that they were reading from, and then through kind of whatever answer I gave, they would throw one out and stay with the other ones until they got down to the leaf that was my leaf. And it just impressed me that there was such a huge bundle of leaves that had been stored somewhere. And, there's obviously thousands upon thousands of these leaves that have been preserved in these ancient libraries and are there to be accessed by those who have an interest in having a reading done. And to me, that was kind of the mind-blowing part, ahead of getting the details that I was given about my life and about the things that kind of motivated me, and then the call to action and the things that I was guided to look at. So you kind of have to be ready for it, I think, because it can be a bit mind-blowing, to put it mildly.
Yeah, I mean, definitely some people I know have gotten a reading, and they just, similar with like getting a great psychic reading or medium reading, and they were just kind of slack-jawed. I mean, I think this gives a real good outline of potentially your life from now until when you leave this planet. And the other thing I was going to say is in regards to all the different leaves, because sometimes they'll be reading one and it'll be yes, 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 and then they'll hit a no, and they go, not this leaf. So I think the lot of the leaves may potentially just represent different timelines if you had done this instead of that. And then furthermore, maybe it's possible also because a lot of us have similar experiences. So perhaps someone has some karmas, some souls have some very similar karmas to us and have lived therefore a very similar existence. So possibility some of these leaves are alternative timelines for us. Other possibility is other souls with similar but slightly different karmas. And they're sort of, making their way through, so they always talk about this idea, I guess, of soul families. And so, perhaps some other souls in your soul family have some similar, upbringing. I mean, I think anytime you get into a large gathering, especially a spiritual gathering, you're going to find people that have had some really similar experiences, and they generally will find each other because of those shared vasanas, those tendencies, those karmas. You know,
Yes.
when you meet each other, you kind of, there's a sense of having come to a same point. You know, I always think it's interesting when you go to a place such as Arunachala or other holy places. You know, you meet someone from another part of the world who's had all of these different life experiences, and you know, whatever age they are, whatever age you are, and there you are at the same time, at the same place, seeking, you know, to go deeper. And I've always found that really interesting because they've made billions and billions of choices just in this lifetime, and you've made billions and billions of choices, and all of those choices have led to that moment at that place.
Yes.
I
Yes.
find that really, really interesting, and of course there can be some wild differences, but some stuff must have lined up pretty similar because at the end of the day, especially Westerners, there are not really a lot of Westerners, relatively speaking, that really want to go to Arunachala and, you know, go meditate and seek out siddhas and avatars and saints. Yeah, I mean, there definitely are, and I think they write books and you know, maybe from our perspective because we're so immersed in it, but you know, just to the everyday person, these things are, they're just too strange. They're just too weird. They're just too out there. And it's
Yes.
very different than from the way they were raised. And it was different from the way I was raised, but I never felt that way. It, to me, it always just, yeah, of course. Yeah, that's what it is.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I'm on the same page as you because I've told my story, I don't know how many times, but I was raised as a Catholic in a working class environment in the UK. And from the minute I remember as a kid, I was always looking for someone or something that I knew was not in my kind of immediate circle. And that set me on this quest. And, I saw a National Geographic thing about yogis. And there was this resonance and this pulsation when I saw it. And I knew it was real and I knew it had importance for me. And there was absolutely nobody in my family that had any interest in any of that at all. They thought I was really weird. And a lot of it I didn't even speak about. And it wasn't, yeah, and that was really what propelled me to come to the Bahamas and then to later go to India and to meet my seed guru and to live according to that kind of call and that energetic response. And it's,
So can I ask a question about the Catholic part? So what I find really interesting is, I guess it depends on the variety of Catholic, but a lot of the Catholics are really into stigmata, which is you start bleeding out of your eyes and hands spontaneously. I think to the average person, that's pretty weird. Were your family not the type of Catholics that were interested in stigmata? Were they like, was that the part they ignored? Like,
no,
yeah, so I guess that's my question because that is within Catholicism, right? It's a pretty
yes,
interesting part.
yeah, it really is. And the whole mystical tradition in Catholicism is pretty, it's powerful. But the thing is my mom was an agnostic. She wasn't kind of interested in anything. Well, actually, she used to play around with a Ouija board, and so it was this weird mix. You know what I mean? But my dad was the Catholic, but he would never go to church. He was too busy working, actually. But and he certainly wasn't a devout Catholic. So we weren't really compelled to go to church every week and to do all the kind of the practices around the Catholic tradition. And so I kind of had one foot in and one foot out, but I was sent to Catholic school. And, I used to get into trouble with the nuns all the time because I didn't go to church on Sunday. I was too busy at home taking care of my four brothers and my sister and helping my mom. And of course, the nuns didn't care to ask, why didn't you come to church? What was the reason? They just used to punish me for not going. So that was kind of the background I came out of. But the thing is that even when I was sitting through a church service, and we used to have to go on a Monday morning, there was a name for it. I forget what it was called now, but as a school, we used to have to go to this church, to the service on a Monday morning. And I would just sit there, just in rapture with I used to love the incense. That was a thing for me, and they'd come in and they'd wave the incense. And then I would sit and I'd be watching and mesmerized by the priest, because I knew instinctively and intuitively and felt resonance. If the priest had a direct relationship and was in communion with Jesus, and I could feel if they were kind of fully in it and embodying, Christ, and if they weren't. So that's really what I was looking for. And I didn't even realize all of that. And I couldn't have articulated that as a kid. I just knew, I knew what the resonance felt like if they were in communion, excuse me, and if they weren't. And so that I guess capacity to recognize the truth of beingness was there from the very beginning. And of course, that isn't something you're taught at school. And I also knew that when the nuns were preaching and speaking about Jesus and the importance of, discipline and devotion and all of those things, I also knew if they had an authentic relationship, because my relationship with Jesus was very, very intense and very deeply personal, because I used to have these visitations from him and from angelic beings. And the love that was inherent in those experiences was, beyond words. And so I could tell in the communication from the nuns and the priests if they had the same kind of relationship, or if it was kind of just textbook or learned, or something that they felt they had to say.
Just dogma, just a belief system
Yeah.
and a dogma without the internal experience. It's
Yes.
just, I say there's a difference between being a ventriloquist for God versus being a vessel.
Yes. That's really.
Yeah, there's a lot of, just they're just the puppet for the, they're just talking it, but they don't have the experience. They don't embody it. They don't bring that peace into the room with them.
Yes. And so that's always been my kind of radar, or however you want to put that. I can just feel, I can just tell, I just know. And I think it's true for all of us when we are in the company of a great being, an authentic being. You really do feel it. You can feel this Shakti, and it's unmistakable. And
for me, I just find that my mind gets quiet and everything just gets quiet, and it's easier to go deeper in the meditation.
yes,
There's
it's like
I'm riding a high for at least, there's levels of how much of the high I'm riding, but for at least, a few days after the experience.
yes, it's like I remember years ago, Gurmai was saying something to the effect, the mind becomes still and takes rest in the heart. And that's what happens, like everything pranams, it collapses, the noise of the mind, the conditioning, it just falls. Well, it did in my case. That's what happened. And it was absolutely irrevocable. It was completely seen. Everything was seen. And that was true too when I had the lucid dream with Bhagavan Nityananda of Ganeshpuri. It was like my whole being and everything just collapsed in his presence.
Is there another Bhagavan Nityananda that's well known? Because I kind of notice you usually make reference from Ganeshpuri. Is there another one that's?
Yes, there's one who has a bit of a let's just say sketchy.
Oh, that's why you're qualifying it. Okay. Because I'm like, usually when I refer to a siddha, I never mention where they're from. And every time you'll mention, and I go, okay, now I got it. Okay.
Yes.
Like, why is that? Why is always Ganesh? I was like, are there that many of them? And I go, okay, now I know the more recent. Yes, I understand.
Yes, because there's a younger one. I don't know too much about the background, but there's a younger one who's been accused of, all kinds of behaviors that are not, let's just say they're not dharmic and yogic. If it's true, I mean, it might not.
Likes the world.
Yes, that's the one. So so that's why I always qualify that. And also, a couple of times in interviews and so on, when I haven't said of Ganeshpuri, I've often had I've been lambasted and accused of associating with this kind of nefarious, and I just got tired of having to. Not that I have to defend anything, but I just
I get it now, but I was like every time I was like, wait, like okay, like, but I guess it's funny to me because when someone says that, I don't know, I just think, I guess in the deepest sense, they're still alive, right? But the physical body sense, they're not. Like I could just go hang out with him in Ganesh Puri and touch his feet. And that's unless, where he's reincarnated is not so doable at the moment. But yeah, I get it. I understand. I understand.
Yeah. Well, look, and the thing is in Ganesh, because he took Mahasamadhi now, I think it was in 1964. And I mean, it's a long time ago, but his house has been preserved there because towards the end of his life, he went to Ganeshpuri and just kind of said all his days of traveling were over, and that's where he was staying. And he has a little house, a very, very modest little house, and there's a temple that is next to where he lives. And the house has been preserved. And when you go in there, he used to lay across this kind of like concrete pillar, to sleep. And there are a few photographs around the place, but you're allowed to go in there. And honestly, the Shakti in that place is just so incredibly powerful and intense, even all these decades later. It's really, really amazing. And they do puja at the temple. They do puja to him, every day, 3 or 4 times a day. And people still are telling stories about, he still comes to people in dreams. He gives teachings. I often have dreams about him and I feel his presence and he directs me and guides me and so on and so forth. And that is the truth with an authentic avadut or an authentic siddha. There's no time, there's no space. And even if they're not in the body, it doesn't matter. They will get your attention and give you guidance and, give you a kick up the butt if you need it. And also send people to you that, may you recognize as a message, that's coming from the guru through this person. And that person might not even know what they're saying or why they're saying it to you. So it's really remarkable the way that works. And I know that you've had your own direct experience of what this means. And it's mind-boggling for the Western mind. The Western mind could never understand any of that.
But it's interesting though, because most Westerners come out of one of the Abrahamic religions, and all of the stories they read have these types of stories in there, and then somewhere along the way, it just this idea that only happened thousands of years ago to those people, and now it sort of doesn't happen, right? I feel that in the West, the miracle is getting the job, the guy, the girl, the money, the prestige, and that's the miracle.
Yes.
And those, and not to say those aren't miracles within their own right. I'm not trying to dismiss them, but you can get all of those things and it still doesn't bring you to the self, the true self. It doesn't bring you to the tremendous peace. And I feel that when the mind's been clamoring for something for a while and you get it, there is that initial, the mind becomes quiet for a little bit because it's gotten what it's clamoring for. And then very quickly, either it then says, well, this isn't enough, or actually, I don't want this anymore. It then goes on looking for the next thing to clamor for. And it just becomes endless. It's what's next. And I think, especially for anyone out there who's in a transition in their life right now, the what's next thing can bring up a lot of anxiety, sometimes excitement mixed with anxiety, right? A combination. And I think it's good to, obviously have that enthusiasm to what you're stepping into. But the idea that whatever we're stepping into is an answer or a solution, maybe in a worldly sense, it can be. but in a deeper sense, it will never be that. And it's so easy to forget that in a world that is so externally driven. Everything is so externally driven. And when you're surrounded by it, for it not to rub off on you to some extent, it's very difficult. Your practice has to be very strong not to have that something outside of you is the answer type of perception.
Yes, which is why it's helpful to have a sage or a siddha or an avatar or an enlightened being in your life that you can utilize as a touchstone and connect in with and feel supported and guided by. It does make a huge difference, because, as you said, you can just kind of get lost in looking for external gratification, and that will just go on endlessly, and you'll never be happy. And
the validation, there's no ego ever that said, you know what, I've now gotten enough validation, I'm good, let's cut it off here. It's never gonna happen. There's no ego in the world that says, it's been a few really good years of validation, I'm gonna quit while I'm ahead. I'm covered. I'm covered on a lifetime of validation. I no longer want it. And it's just the nature of the ego. It never gets enough of that. It can never, and I think in the earlier stages for people, it's needed. It's a type of encouragement. But as you start to progress, you start to realize, I'll never have enough validation coming from that place. There is no, it's a bottomless pit, and it's a trap. Better than validation is realization, and then realizing, the infinite self. Realization, not validation. And I think as we grow, that's what we look for more realization, less validation.
Yes. And also serving that, so that when you're connected in with your higher self, whatever you want to call that, and you're kind of in the flow of that, then responding to what that wants you to do and be in the world, whether it's doing healings or speaking to people or supporting them or teaching or whatever it is, to align yourself with what you're being called to. And really, that's where you get the highest joy and the greatest satisfaction from, in my view.
Yeah. But it's interesting too, because then you'll have people like Nisargadatta Maharaj, who had a shop and sold lots of cigarettes or beads, right? So not everyone's worldly work will reflect their spiritual realization.
No, but listen, that's perfect though, right? Imagine all the people that used to come to him to get their cigarettes, without realizing who this being was. Or maybe you could, I'm sure they could feel the energy, the Shakti around him.
Well, I don't know how much cigarette selling he did once the realization happened. That maybe there were family members still running the shop and keeping it going. But I think I don't know that he was like down there running the shop, at that point. I don't know. I don't really know enough about the details of his life in that way. But a lot of people who I respect considered him to be self-realized. And I always joke that he's the ultimate trash talker of Vedanta Advaita. It's a very, even when you see him speak sometimes, it just looks like he's screaming.
I know.
He's very fiery. He's like, wake up now, snap out of this. I don't know what he's, the translation, but it's really funny too, because he'll be yelling, and then the English translator, I think it's like a British person on one of, it's just like this very calm.
Yes.
And he's just yelling. And I get such a kick out of that. It's just, this idea of what a realized being is supposed to act like or behave like. I think we have a lot of ideas of what that is. And it doesn't mean that it can't be that. But some of these enlightened beings are pretty fiery, and they're not here to always be soft with you.
No, no, because I know Bhagavan Nityananda used to kick people out and send them away. And he even took a stick and he beat Muktananda with the stick because Muktananda apparently had made a bit of a show of some siddhi, some supernatural power. And Bhagavan Nityananda just kept beating him and saying that is not what the siddhis are to be utilized for. You're not meant to make a show of them. They're not like a circus trick, you know. And he would throw often also he would take rocks and stones and throw them at people who'd come to him to they would count his fingers, you know, if he made a movement with his hands they would count how many fingers he'd moved and then they would use those numbers to do some betting, you know, they were looking. So he would see them coming and he'd pick up a rock and just throw it at them to get them and then send them away.
But it's also funny on the flip side of that. I know stories of truly enlightened beings that sort of may just give someone the winning lottery numbers. I mean, obviously those people, you know, the karma's there, whatever. Or there's a story I know of Neem Karoli Baba where he's looking around everyone in the room and he's like, "You will never have to worry about money. You will be." And there's one person really wanting, you know, him to say that to them, and he just looks and he finally turns to me and goes, "What do you want? You don't have that karma in this. You know, you don't have that karma for money. I'm sorry." You know. So I think it's really interesting all the different ways that they will interact with the world. You know, someone recently was complaining to me about I don't know, just having to play politics in a sense, and even a spiritual setting. And I said, you know, having been around a few gurus, they understand how we operate and they condescend to play their role.
Yes.
And they'll, you know, you outside observer would be like, how do they handle these people around them? They're so phony, they're so fake. But they see the Atman and the Brahman that exist beyond that game that these people are playing. And we get fooled by that we sort of, if they play that role, you know, that non-dharmic role, we see them only as non-dharmic, but underneath them is this great being that they're denying, they're not acknowledging.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I also remember Gurumai once saying about someone who was appearing to be very close to her and was a staff member. She said, "I give up with him. He doesn't listen to a word I say. He's like a brick wall. You know, somebody else needs to tell him or teach him." And you know, this guy was standing right there, and he was he was hearing it, and you know, was shocked. But she was very, very, very direct, and also likewise would kick people out if they weren't doing the practices, and they were just kind of, you know, faking it, I suppose is the best way of putting it.
Seems
And
so funny to me to go there to any you know, saint, sage or whatever, and fake it. You know, why bother? Why not just go to the casino and gamble? Why not, you know, go out and gallivant in the world? It is a funny thing to me to do that. Why? I don't see the point of it.
no, I don't either. But yeah, I don't get it. It seems to me like a colossal waste of time. But I think you can be very good, and we can all be very good at fooling ourselves and pretending that something elevating is happening and really nothing's happening at all, and we're just being lazy or we're not looking at what we need to look at or whatever, you know. So, and that certainly happens in spiritual communities where you have people seemingly emulating the guru and wearing the robes and adopting a spiritual name and, you know, everything else, but not really knuckling down and doing what they're being called to do. Yeah, I think that's fairly common. You know, it's good. Anybody can quote the guru, right? But can you embody what he or she is teaching? Can you do the work?
Gemini and Chat GPT can quote all the gurus, I would think. I would hope by this point, but who knows?
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, it can be really tricky, and you know, I've known people in spiritual communities who've been with the guru for like 30, 40 years and are still full of anger and frustrated and, wanting to leave the community, but don't have the courage to do it. And, it runs the gamut. So, yeah, it's just easy to, I guess, fool yourself.
But at the same time, it's not. There's so much suffering that accompanies that choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
This idea, I think of Yogi and Yogananda's book, and everyone was so amazed. He came from a lot of wealth, and he turned it away, and everyone was so impressed. And he said, I turned away some tinsel, basically, for the divine treasures of God. Well, what did I sacrifice? You don't understand. And I think that's the biggest thing is, I think there's levels, right? I think, where I'm at, I'm still at times sacrificing. But I think ultimately when you get around these really divine beings, no matter how much people say, oh, they sacrifice. No, they just exist in this tremendous infinite bliss that is beyond the imagination, and you're the one that's sacrificing. Everyone else is sacrificing for making a bad trade. They're sacrificing their energy, their time for all the things of the world, and they look at this person and go, oh wow, what a sacrifice to devote yourself to God. But it's like, no, you're sacrificing because you're devoting yourself to this world, and this world will fall apart and it will fall away, and everything you work for will fall away. So what are you here for?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Krishna Das has a fantastic story. When he comes to Nassau to go to the Shivananda ashram, he'll do his set and just beautiful chanting music, and then he tells stories in between of his time with his guru Neem Karoli Baba. And he said one time that somebody came to Neem Karoli Baba and was expressing this idea and the importance of maybe generating income through having Westerners come to the ashram and pay for programs and courses and things like that. And Neem Karoli Baba just kind of threw his hands up and was laughing and saying he wasn't interested. And he said, why concern myself with that? All the money in the world is mine, he said. And Krishna Das was just blown away. He said, what a perspective. And he was speaking from this place of infinite, limitless abundance. Neem Karoli Baba had no need or interest in any of it, because he said everything, in the world, all forms of abundance were his as the one self. And that just, that is a whole different way of being and relating. And of course, it's the truth.
It's always that thing of being able to nod my head and acknowledge truth versus that next step, which is that I internalize that truth fully, so that I not that I just know that to be true in this moment, but that I always know that to be true, and I'm always living that truth. And I think that's always where it gets more challenging, because nobody's ego wants to die. And, this little I keeps popping up, and it wants this and it wants that, and it fears this and it fears that. And, it eventually just has to dissolve. And there's just the eternal I there.
Yes. And, the thing is that we'll have our own particular specific challenges based on our conditioning, right? And what we were taught and what we were, trained to believe in as kids, and which we've inherited. And so if we have challenges around lack, for example, which was certainly big in my story, and, fear of lack and all of those things, then those are things that will challenge us as we do our sadhana, as we do the practices, as we attempt to live in accordance with the pure self. and it's always unique for each and every one of us. It's never easy, right? It's never easy.
And yet at the same time, it's easier than what the other option is.
Yes.
Which is to needlessly suffer throughout this life and many lives to come. So from that standpoint, it seems pretty easy if those are my two options, right? I can end this suffering quickly, or I can continue to go about the way that the mind has programmed me and just suffer needlessly.
Yes. Yes. So are you still on tour with
Amma Kurunami has now left the US. She's
okay.
gone back to India. And I'm just, looking for a sense of where the universe would like me to go. I'm considering invitation to Mexico. So, I'll just keep chant my mantra, meditate, and see where it is that comes up next. She'll come back to the US in spring of next year. This year's tour was cut a bit short. It was a couple months instead of, normally it's about 5 months or more.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Kurunami spent a lot of time in the US. So anyone who's in the US, if you want to see Amma Kurunami, she goes to quite a few different cities. Highly recommend it. It's, I've always felt her guiding me, and, sometimes she'll say things out loud to me to come somewhere, go somewhere, and I just continue to do my best to hear the call and heed it and do as God.
Mm-hmm. And when she's in India, whereabouts is she based?
She is mostly based in Andhra Pradesh, in Penchalakona. There's actually a very ancient temple in the small little town village that she's in. I think that is maybe 5,000 years old. It's one of the older ones in all of India. She has an ashram there, and there's a beautiful backdrop of these mountains and some waterfalls, and it's a very special place, and it's very, very remote.
And so people can go, they can apply to go there. Is it open?
Yeah, they have meditation retreats. You can apply to get in, and if you do, and then there's a different price to go at another time. I mean, the ashram is pretty small, so, and for these retreats, they're very Western friendly. They cater these very nice. The food is very good. They want to. They know how hard it is for Westerners to want to come there, and they do their best to give them, a very, very, very good food. And on a few occasions, Amma Kurunami herself will make the food. Yeah, which is really nice. So, but
And
then people that also go there when it's not the official time, and they don't get the same sort of. It's not so much of a program. They don't get the same type of food experience.
But so she in a retreat, for example, she would be speaking every day, or how does it work?
It is some. The retreats will kind of go on for a bit. Sometimes she will come out and give quite a bit of talks. Sometimes she'll be more in silence. It just depends. Sometimes she'll say, "Hey, let's go to this ancient temple." So I wouldn't say it's so specific. It's not. There's some aspect of structure, but it's a lot of people that are very dedicated to meditate, and they show up there to meditate, to really do that difficult, uncomfortable amounts of sun.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's nice, though. I mean, it's great that you can apply and go.
Yeah.
Visit,
But also, just for people that aren't going to go to India, she's in the U.S. quite frequently, and you can see her in a city or state nearby you.
And so when she comes to the US, she gives darshan and she gives a talk, or is it just darshan?
Yeah, no. So there's individual blessing day. She always talks. It always goes later for the most part than whatever it says. Usually starts a little bit later than whatever it says. And there's a fire ceremony most places. In Georgia, she'll do a 10-day fire ceremony. So yeah, there's a lot of really amazing stuff that that she does.
Mm.
Um, and,
So,
uh, and there's a meditation retreat day. The meditation retreat day is the only day that there's a fee for. And there's the first half and the second half. And, yeah, and it's very well priced because they got the venue and the food and everything, and it's quite affordable for what it is. I see these other people out there that have nowhere near the level of what she has, and it's you go a couple hours and it's $500 for them, and for the whole day for her, I don't know, it depends on the city, maybe it's 160 with food included. So it's
wow.
just it's a very different, it's not, we live in a world that has expenses, but it's very much trying to, if you're wanting to become self-realized, if you're wanting to deepen your practice, if you're wanting to learn about the Vedas or Arab Veda or Vedic astrology, these are things that she'll frequently talk about. Like individual blessing day is always the biggest day, because most people, they just want to come and get blessed by a saint and get their wishes granted and then go back to watch their favorite shows, go back to whatever that is. And there's a lot less people that want to meditate for a good part of a day. It's just not as appealing. So individual blessing day, far and away, I would say, is the most popular day.
Oh, that's completely free. You can just register and turn up, and it's free.
And even going to the Yagna fire ceremony day is also completely free, assuming you're not doing offerings. Yeah. You can sit there and take in the mantras and the fire and just be with it. So that's free as well.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, so on the blessing day, you would go up and she would bless, tap you on the head.
She'll bless you. She'll put her hand on your head. Sometimes she will say specific things to people about what's going on in their life, and they don't quite realize who or what she is. So they're very taken aback. They just think, oh, this is some religious teacher. Sure, I'll check it out. They don't know. And then she, lets them know that she's a lot more than that. And
Wow.
yeah, I've seen her do a lot of those things to some very skeptical people. It's amazing though, but everyone's karma is different, and some of these people, I always think of that famous saying, a pickpocket sees a saint and all he sees are pockets.
Yes.
And so it's just, where's your consciousness, where's your awareness, and that's all you're gonna be capable of seeing. But at the same time, people that wouldn't say that they're that spiritual or whatever it might be, they experience something really incredible in her presence, and she just has this tremendous stillness. I mean, being able to sit with wild tigers for 10 years in a remote forest is no small accomplishment. That's not normal.
No. Oh, I didn't realize that's a part of her background.
Yeah, she did 10 years out there where her ashram is, and she was sitting with wild tigers, and there's photos from back in the day of her just sitting there, and there'd be wild tigers just sitting in front of her, watching over her.
Wow.
She did some of the most extreme tapas. She is not normal by any stretch of the imagination.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you have the chance, anybody who's watching this, to go spend time and be in the presence of Amma Kurunami, then I would take it. But is it, are there thousands of people that turn up?
Not in the US. I mean, in India, she'll be on TV a lot, and people certainly know who she is. And sometimes she would have big, uh, some event at some ancient temple or whatever it might be, and big events could get hundreds of thousands of people coming. So it could be really big. But in the US, we're not that interested in this. Uh, if Amma can't throw a football or shoot a basketball or hit a baseball, it's just not that appealing, to the average Westerner. So there's a lot less interest in these types of things.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
exist, but it's not the focus. And even the people who are from India, and there are a lot of Indians in the US, they've come for the Western dream, and they're more of a religious nature necessarily, a lot of them, than a truly seeking self-realization and seeking to be in the presence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think also with certain people, I think misogyny probably also sometimes pops up for some people. Oh, she's a woman. I want a male guru or whatever they have.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm the peace and the bliss and the guidance. I mean, I try to be around her as much as it works out.
Mm-hmm. So was there a moment for you when you absolutely recognized this being is my guru? This being is the one I want to spend time with.
So I saw her in a magazine, and she was coming to New York, and I just was very excited about it. I really didn't know anything about her. I didn't have any background. I just saw her in a magazine. I said, "Her, I'm gonna stay here. I'm just gonna come home and see her." And I told a lot of people. I was very excited, and I went there, and I think I told this story last time, but she walks past me, and she just stops abruptly, and she turns around, she looks right at me, and she smiles and waves. And I'd been talking to her photo for days, for weeks really, prior to that. And I didn't know that it was both ways. I thought I was just eccentric. And there was a guy with me who was kind of an atheist and atheist agnostic. And he turned to my friend and he goes, "It's kind of weird how all you weird spiritual people seem to know each other." And I didn't hear him say that at the time. I found out later. But yeah, and then eventually went up there and she touched me here, and it felt like my head cracked open and I was just sobbing. I I don't really sob. I may cry, but I don't really sob. And I just felt all this weight was ripped off me. But even then, I didn't necessarily have this conscious thought of this is my guru. But I was blown away, and I knew this was a being I wanted to keep seeing, and I would continue to see her and be in her presence.
Mm.
I've continued, and then for the next few years, she would only say, "I love you, my son." That particular first time, she said quite a bit to me, and there would be about another 4 years before she would actually really start talking to me again and saying stuff. So,
Wow.
they know where we're at, how ripe or how not ripe we are, and what we're ready for. And they see us not as we see ourselves, but they see us for who we really are and who we will become. And yeah, she's. I mean, I think of her always, and every now and then I'll get around a very psychic, intuitive person, and they'll pick up on her presence. They won't necessarily be able to, say, "Oh, Shri Amma," but they'll feel her hand upon.
Mm. Beautiful. Wonderful.
I think there's a thought that I always we might have mentioned last time, but this idea of when it's time to sort of get in front of the physical guru versus understanding that they're always with you. And I think there's a balance. I think, yes, if you're a very evolved being, there's not one moment that you're not aware that the guru is with you and you don't need to be in their physical presence. But I think for others, being in their physical presence is really important, which is, you look at Ramana, and he had a lot of great devotees around him, and they were generally around him. They didn't just come one time, go back to where they're from, and they go, Ramana's always with me. And it's true. It's not to say, but it's this balance of knowing when is it time to go see the physical form of them, and when is it time to realize that ultimately they're inside of me, and they're all around me. And it's a balance, and knowing when. But I feel her call when she calls me, and I feel I know, and I go. And sometimes she'll say to me, son, come to, and I'll go wherever she tells me to go. Last year, she was very insistent I go to India multiple times. So I went to India. I didn't actually see her in India, but I went to India because that's what she said. She just kept telling me to come to India. So I did.
Beautiful. Well, I can feel her presence while you're speaking. Really palpable.
It's very easy to, especially at times when you get caught in the noise of the mind, to forget all the blessings that you've been given. But in moments such as this, I'm moderately aware. I think only much later in my journey will I ever be able to say that I'm fully aware of all the blessings that she's given me. I'm just somewhat aware. But even with a little awareness that I do have, I know I'm incredibly lucky, and that's why I always try to get any friend of mine that I know who's spiritually seeking or going through a difficult time to go see her. And a lot of people told me they've gone to her and their problems, some cases completely resolved, in other cases got better. So I think it's important to sit with holy people, especially during these times. And of course, there are a lot of phonies out there, but I think it's worth, eventually you develop a discernment, but for people earlier on, I think it's worthwhile to see a bunch of phonies to find one real one. I think it's worth it. If you're willing to fail at so many other things where the payoff won't be nearly as valuable, I think it's worth, if you're even, well, maybe they're legit, check them out.
Yes.
Check them out.
So Te'Devan, I think maybe this is a great place to end this episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. This has been really wonderful, as always. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. As always, we both really appreciate you watching. And please leave a comment, even if it's just an emoji, a like, anything will do. And if you haven't already subscribed, you know what to do. So thanks again. Take it easy, be well, and bye for now.